I would challenge you to go back to the training to listen to, throughout the week about training and then evaluate what you have or haven't been through because the training team has made some significant strides over the last couple of years to keep these trainings updated and to add to their classes. So we have the procurement, and I think in this course you're gonna or this week of seminar you're gonna be able to sign up for a lot of these trainings or shown how to. So um, there's a new certification, and that's called the Foundations in Procurement. And those are classes that are made up of online and virtual classes. I know another thing that we hear about in the past is that training was in person. You had to come to Nashville for it. You had to sit in the training room for it. We're trying to get away from that being the only delivery for the training. So the Foundations in Procurement is a new program that provides these skills and provides this training through kind of a different service delivery there. So if you've already done the basic certification, then the new foundations of procurement is 2 additional classes on top of the original basic certification, and you can do those 2 30-minute classes online to receive the foundations in procurement certification. Um, Keeping your training relevant is or recent is really important. You know, you have access to these trainings through ELM and Edison. So take advantage of going back through those. If there's something that you're not sure how to do, you can go back in and take some of those online trainings as refreshers. And if you're ever looking through those and unsure maybe what would be the most relevant training, you can reach out to cpo.training@tn.gov, and that will go to Kim and James and Angela, and they'll be able to help you um, decide, what's your best avenue for going through training. So training's obviously very important. That classroom setting is very important. We spent a lot of time on coming up with the best possible classes. We also have great job aids, and that same group works through the creation and maintaining of those job aids. I think that originally we had maybe 15 or 20 job aids. At this point, we have 44 job aids. So that's anything from logging into Edison to working with vendors to really specific things like filling out a specific e-form. Like something that might only be a couple of pages, but is a new process. And the training team's gone in, created the document, pulled screenshots from Edison, and made it like a really quick and easy way to learn how to do something that's maybe new to somebody or maybe new to all of the procurement and state government because it wasn't used before. So when you're using these job aids, one of our pieces of advice is to go to the intranet site and grab them each time, because Kim and James and Angela and a lot of people that they use as subject matter experts spend time updating those as Edison changes, policies change, the process changes, whatever. So make sure that you're getting the most relevant document from the intranet site. But like I said, 44 different documents out there. That's on the Team TN /CPO website, and you can go through learning and development to find that. Um, the last part of training, which I think is really cool, and I know that Mike Perry, our Chief Procurement Officer, he always spends a lot of time giving the training team kudos on this, is our knowledge bursts. So knowledge bursts are housed within our YouTube channel, and they're usually less than 5 minutes, but they're just a crash course into doing a particular topic. So it might be signing a vendor up in Edison, or it might be, how to place a bid, something that you could walk through and use as like a FAQ type thing. So a lot of times those are good resources instead of having to sit on the phone with somebody, that you can copy and paste the YouTube link and maybe send it to a vendor and say, hey, watch this, see if it gets you what you need. If not, give me a call back. But those are things that we're adding to fairly frequently. Those, if there's a need for something that would fit that method, then we're all about creating and adding to that, just like we have done the job aids in the past. So I think to sum up this point, our number one tip is go through the training, and you will be able to get your procurements done faster if you were properly trained. So we're going to go through a couple of true and false questions here. There are no training tools available to me. I'll let you use the chat on this one. We'll start out with an easy one. True or false? There are no training tools.
False.
Yeah, it's obviously false. So a lot of tools here. If you've got issues, find them. You can't find them on the website. You don't know where they're at. You can reach out to training. You can reach out to your sourcing account specialist, Mike, and our guys in sourcing they can help you find where those documents are. CPO learning and development can help me get signed up for training. So true or false on this one? Yeah, so this is true. Maybe a little caveat is go in there and familiarize yourself with ELM and see, through searching there what you find that they're offering. But yes, if you've got questions about the training, you need help signing up, you don't know what's relevant for your job, maybe say you're hiring somebody new and you're trying to figure out, what training they need to start off with and when they should go through it. Definitely reach out to Kim and James and Angela. They would be more than happy to help you with that. I should retake procurement classes, ... even if it's been a few years. Yeah, a lot of truths. I wouldn't, go through every single one every 6 months or anything. They're probably not getting updated that frequently, but if the last time you went through training is 2011, 12, 13, definitely need a refresher on that. If there's new things that, are getting introduced to your process, and aren't as familiar with them, you can definitely go through and refresh your skills through ELM and through the training team. And then lastly, I don't have to have my procurement certification. I don't know if this one's probably false for most of the people in here. I think it's probably dependent on, yeah, probably most false, 50-50 maybe. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it depends what your job title is and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. If procurement's a small piece of what your job is, the procurement certification might not be relevant for your position, but I think that it definitely wouldn't hurt. And, I think a lot of times we see people work in that certification as part of maybe like an IPP or like a stretch goal to maybe go above and beyond to get that certification. But I don't think that you have to have it. But if you're in a procurement role, you're doing procurement most of the time, you probably need it in that sense. So I'm going to send this over to Mike and we'll start with tip number 2.
Thanks, Nick. So when y'all are sending things over to CPO for our review, for us to send out the solicitation, we are doing research on our own, but there is a general expectation that the agency has done a certain level of due diligence and research on their own time before sending it to us. And so we've developed some kind of questions within this for research that you could ask yourself when you're starting any kind of procurement. The first one is the good or service already on a statewide contract? This can help you save a lot of time because if it can simply be added to a statewide contract, or if it's already on the statewide contract, you can simply contact the statewide contract administrator and make the purchase through there rather than going through the whole procurement process from beginning to end, which could take months depending on which solicitation method you choose. When you're doing research to set up your solicitations, be it an ITB, an RFP, an RFQ, have you looked at potential vendors? The more vendors you can give us to supplement what CPO's own research has done, the better. We want this to work hand in hand. We don't want it to work in a silo. We want to work together on those. Additionally, if you're doing an RFP or an RFQ, think about what kind of what evaluators you want on that solicitation. There is a significant time commitment for those evaluators. So if you can set up those expectations and set those evaluators in stone before the solicitation begins, that'll save you from having to potentially scramble to find new evaluators or work on fixing everybody's schedule to meet the deadlines of the RFP or the RFQ. When you're building a contract, whether it's for a new solicitation, a resolicitation, or you're just building a contract that's going to go to a sole source, have you reviewed the old contract? when you're looking at the old contract, think about things that you can update. If you can just simply use the old contract and make small tweaks to isolate or fix problems that happened in the previous procurement or contract, that will save you a lot of time as well. One thing to think about when you're doing that is transition time. There are certain contracts that have to have a long transition period. Make sure you build that into your timing of that procurement or re-procurement. If you need like 6 months of transition, maybe start it 6 months earlier than you normally would have, so you give yourself that kind of cushion. If you haven't, one other question you can ask is about RFIs. Do you have time to do an RFI? RFIs are a great opportunity for you to develop specifications. It can help you identify potential pitfalls in a procurement that you're looking for. Generally, you're doing an RFI for one or two reasons. You know who's in the industry, but you don't really know what you want, or you know exactly what you want, but you don't know who can give it to you, or somewhere in between. An RFI does take time, but it is a great opportunity for y'all to, like I said, find those things that are going to foreshadow issues in your procurement. Because if we don't sort out those issues on the front end, there's a potential that we have to do amendments on during the solicitation that's going to continually push out your timeline, which is going to delay your procurement. Sometimes even doing an RFI, you could find out that there actually is nobody else in there, and it could lead you into a sole source, which leads me into my next point. Is your procurement a sole source, or is it proprietary if it's not a competitive procurement? If it's a sole source, in this procurement manual which you can find on our website, we have a list of justifications that you can use to justify that sole source. If you aren't really sure which one it falls into, reach out to the person in your agency that's your direct contact with CPO, and have them reach out to us, and we can work with y'all on building a justification. We do a lot of these. We have seen it all, basically. So we can help you, write that justification if that's what we need. Along with doing any solicitation, make sure you have your endorsements. STS endorsements can take up to 2 weeks. DOHR endorsements can take up to a week to 2 weeks. You need to have those ahead of time before the procurement can go forward. Let me jump back to sole source and proprietary procurements really quick. More specifically to sole source, one of the things that we see taking up a lot of time is someone may send us a sole source, and we at CPO could do a quick Google search and find that there are many more vendors in that space that could do that actual service or provide that actual good. So then we're going to have to ask questions about like, hey, why can't these other, let's say 5 companies do this, even though they have a similar product? What makes this one person special? So that's going to delay the procurement, because we're going to have to ask those questions. And if it turns out that it's not a sole source, then you've put all this time into building the sole source, potentially building that contract, getting it ready, and now you have to go through a full procurement. So the earlier you involve us, if you have a question about your sole source, the better off it's going to be for y'all. Obviously, there are some situations where it's a rock solid sole source. You really don't need to, come to us and ask us questions. But if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us. The last thing you could potentially do for your research is keep track of your contracts. You could we have an annual contract management plan that some of our agencies use. It lists the contract number, start and end date, how much money is left. And we use that as a tool to plan ahead of time for re-procurements or doing extensions or amendments. All these things that we can do research you can do beforehand to help set a timeline is going to save you time in the long run. Does anybody have any questions so far? General or specific?
There was a question of where can we find that, but I'm not sure I know what.
I think it was the annual contract management plan.
The annual contract management plan?
That's going to be sent out to everybody here.
Yeah, if you're one of the agencies that uses the CMP, we call it, it will be sent out here in the next few weeks. Once we get in, I think it starts in beginning of October, right? End of September is when we send it out. Okay. Anybody else? Not, we'll go ahead. And I'm going to pass it off to Nick here.
Cool. I saw one of the comments was that we're killing people with acronyms, so we'll try to define those as we go. So yeah, RFI, I think Tara put it in there, request for information, or James did. We'll try as we go through if we've got any of those too. I see my first point has one in there, so I'll make sure that I spell it out. So kind of a transitioning question here. Is there someone able to help me when I don't know where to start? We get this a lot of times. There's legislation gets passed. We got to start getting something in place, implementing some sort of new program. Where do I start? What's the first step? That's going to lead me into the third tip, which is communication. So we got a question.
Says, does the CPO support a one brand or equal solicitation event? I found that this is a better way to find out if the product or service requested is a true sole source. One brand or equal is based on the product or service specifications and then technology.
Basically, they're asking like, hey, can we get like a Panasonic TV or equal or equivalent?
Yes, that's yeah, we do that. The specs have to align it. So, if it was a Panasonic TV or a Sony TV, you would still need to say, those two brands or equivalent, and it has to be 52 inches and have this many HDMI ports, and, it can be mounted on the wall. I mean, whatever the other specs would be. But no, I think a lot of times that's where that's a good starting point to say, this is, we've done some research. We know there's a couple of brands that are relevant. But what you wouldn't want to say is, and I'm going to make this, it's going to sound silly, but, you wouldn't want to say it's, the brand has to, or, it has to have the Sony whatever plug-in, something that's specific to them, and also try to put it out as a competitive solicitation. So anything that's too specific, you probably would want to leave that off for competition's sake. But if that extra component is something that you absolutely have to have, then that probably moves it more from a competitive solicitation to a sole source or proprietary solicitation, depending on the market there. So no, that's a good question. And a lot of times, if you look at really technically written specs, there will be some sort of brand there to point people in the right direction. So tip number 3 is communication. And I wrote down as I was preparing for this, constant communication, because I think that's the best way for solicitations to stay on track and for the end result to be what we want it to be. So one thing that we do, and I say this, and with COVID, it's been a little bit different because of the format that we did it with, was the collaborative user group, or you'll see it called CUG. That's a communication email group, and honestly, kind of like this seminar where we would meet for like an hour each month or every other month, where we go through and we do updates and do have speakers and that sort of thing. It's about 30 or 40 people that make up that group. I think it's maybe 8 or 10 different agencies. Anybody that's in the procurement world is obviously welcome to that. So if you guys want to be added to that collaborative user group, you can email Chris Salita. He's the director of sourcing, chris.salita@tn.gov, and he'd be happy to add you to that. I don't know what that group, like as we transition back, or maybe not back, but into whatever the new world's post-COVID looks like, what that's going to be. I mean, it might be something like this. It might be in person. It might be something that's filmed beforehand. I don't know, but that's been something that's really useful to just communicate out the normal day-to-day like process changes or policy changes. And I think most of the people that have been to that can vouch, if you guys want to use the comment section for this, but I think a lot of people that go to that continuously can vouch that that's a good avenue for getting information and being in the loop on things. To me, this next point about working with your sourcing account specialist is probably the most important thing in this communication section. So, if you're working through like the lead-in question of where do I start, your sourcing account specialist is going to be your best option. They're going to be able to give you like the biggest value add for figuring out what you need to do and what your route is. So that might be options for what type of procurement that you need to run. That might be benchmarking what other states have done. That might be what other departments in the state, if somebody, if somebody at the Department of Safety does something, Mike works with TBI, Mike and the safety sourcing account specialist, they might meet up and say, hey, safety bought this, TBI is trying to buy this. Do you have specs? How did you guys procure it? What did you evaluate? So a lot of that collaboration is very, very useful if the information's kind of brought to us ahead of time. So, include your sourcing account specialist as early on in the process as possible, and make sure that they know what you guys are trying to do, and they can help bring together as many different things to help get the ball rolling. Another part of communication, and this one is a little bit out of our control, but we play a major part in this, is communicating with FRC. So FRC is the Fiscal Review Committee. That's a joint committee in the legislative branch. It's half senators, half representatives. They review all contracts that are over $250,000 and sole source or any amendments to contracts that are over $250,000. The path of communicating with them is twofold. So you could go in front of that committee and do a presentation where you send over a packet of information, and then somebody from your agency goes and presents on that, or it could be through the consent calendar. Make sure you're communicating with your sourcing account specialist about going through that process and making sure that you've asked all the right questions, or getting their advice on what questions to ask, and compiling the correct information for that. So, a lot of times this is a point of confusion for the agencies, and a lot of times we work hand in hand with the agencies to make sure the right information is provided from that. It's not our process, it's in a whole nother branch of government, but we want to be able to support and provide whatever you guys need as far as guidance goes for that. So this is a fairly quick point. Tara, any questions on communication? I think the big takeaway here is make sure you're in constant communication with your sourcing account specialist, and they will really be an avenue to guide you towards where you're wanting to go and the result that you're wanting to seek for your procurement.
We've got two questions.
Okay.
First one, are sourcing specialists department specific? Perhaps we call them something different.
Say that again. My source.
Are sourcing specialists department specific? Perhaps we call them something different.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. So, yes, they're department specific. Each person has somebody in CPO that they are assigned to. So if you don't know who that person is, it's listed on our website under our directory. And some people have one point of contact for the entire department, and other folks have multiple agencies that they work with. So like Mike has multiple agencies. He has 10-Care, he has TBI, he has Department of Agriculture, he has Veterans Affairs. So, you might look on there and might have to find your agency, but there might also be somebody that has just like a one-to-one relationship, and works just specifically with one department. So if you don't know who that person is, find it on the CPO directory. Chances are there's probably somebody within your agency. It might not be you, but it might be somebody that's the point of contact that typically works like directly with them. So you might also have to find that person internally to you to like help facilitate reaching out to that person.
The other question is, do they have a deadline for timeline for approval?
Yeah, I think Mike's going to hit on that one in the next point. The next tip, we've got some true or false here. So yeah, collaborative user group, CUG, procurement commission, the procurement manuals are all excellent ways to keep updated with CPO. That's true. That's where you guys are going to see. I guess I should give you time in the chat today. But yeah, that's an easy one. That's true. If you want invites to any of these meetings, you're obviously these are all the procurement commission. All those are public meetings. So, you're more than welcome to come to those. Sometimes it's like tedious changes in a document, and then sometimes it's like bigger changes. So, that's something that if you're interested in, you can go to those and then all the changes through those meetings are posted on our website. I should never let my sourcing account specialist know if I need their help. If it's Mike, I don't know.
False.
That's false. I mean, look, if you guys need help, it might not directly be in the line of procurement, or if you've got a question, these guys, chances are Mike might not know the answer, but I guarantee you he's going to go and find it. And everybody that I can vouch for everybody else that's in our group that, if you put something on their plate, they're going to do their best to like track it down. If it's a contract with another state, if it's a co-op, if it's another state contract, if it's the best procurement method, just even general advisement, they'll be able to help you guys. And then lastly, my sourcing account specialist should be my first point of contact when resolving a procurement issue when one arises. We'll see what people say on this one. I saw a bunch of trues. I saw one or two false. I think this one's mostly true. Yeah, there's another false. I think this one's mostly true. Depending on what the issue is, you might have to like circle your wagons internally, but definitely letting your agents, Tara's laughing, I said circling the wagons, like I'm a cowboy from the 1800s. But yeah, I think that you probably need to like figure out internally what the agency wants and what the agency knows to be true. And then maybe the next step is bringing that to your sourcing account specialist. But, it might be something that Mike is the first point of contact, and maybe you need him to get our legal resources together and help out. So yeah, I think that one's mostly true, but I could see some instances where that might be false depending on the situation. So the approval question, I think that we had, that was our second question, right, Tara?
Yeah.
I think that Mike's going to hit on that one with point number 4. So if that's not fully answered, let us know and we can address the rest of that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nick. Yeah, we are going to talk about that. So timing. Everything that you do before a procurement, this kind of ties in a little bit with research. Everything you can do before the procurement, when you start working on it, that's where you can save the most time. You want the goal with your timing is to avoid surprises or work in expectations that there could be some surprises. You work between the program, CPO legal, agency procurement personnel to make sure you have all the details ironed out as best you can before the procurement goes live, or that you're moving the project in the right direction. And if you give us enough time, we can work with you to develop a timeline like that. Do you understand? One of the other questions you could ask is, do you understand all the procurement options that are and the time that it takes to run each type of procurement? ITBs, for example, which is an invitation to bid. Those are fast, but it's really limited in what we can evaluate. Those are really just low cost bids. You can't evaluate like the quality of something. Typically, you're seeing invitations to bid being run for goods, not so much services, though we do some services through those. Your professional services are more done through the RFQ process. An RFI, which is a request for information, which I mentioned earlier, purely for information gathering. If you do a request for a proposal or a request for qualifications, there's a lot, those of you who have done those, there's a lot of work that goes into those, both before, during, and after. It's heavily involved with different legal groups. You have COT review, you have CPO legal review. You have back and forth between myself as the source account specialist and your program to make sure we're developing the best presentation or solicitation possible. Another thing to keep in mind with the timing of those is, do you have oral presentations? You're going to have an evaluator training, and if the scores are when you do the scoring of the proposals, if you have a great differentiation in scores, you may have to do what we call a post-evaluation meeting. So those are things to keep in mind when you're developing those types of solicitations. So kind of going along with knowing those timelines and options is making sure you understand that you need to use the updated templates for all of those. Now we can supply you with those. If you can't find them, they're also on our website under the resources page. But using the updated templates will save you time because there are often changes that we make to legal language, citations in state statute. That will help you save time because you're using the most updated template. We don't have to make any changes. You don't have to switch it to a new template. Understanding the process and time, you want to set expectations. So if you come to us, something comes up and you want a procurement done in an RFP done in 30 days, we have to be realistic and say, yeah, that's just not going to happen. An RFP does take a significant amount of time. So make sure that at the agency level, and we can help you set those expectations, that we're setting the proper time expectation for all of these types of procurements. And then one other thing to think about is, are you doing a new procurement or a re-procurement? A new procurement is going to take a lot longer inherently because you're building something up from the bottom. That's where an RFI may come in handy for y'all. But a re-procurement, you're really just taking the old contract, like I said earlier, you're updating it, and that's going to save you time in that fashion. You can use the old procurement or even the old contract as a guide going forward. One other thing that can help you is, has your agency's legal team reviewed the contract and solicitation before it goes out? CPO Legal and COT are looking for a polished document so that when they get it, they're just kind of putting the finishing touches on it. And obviously, it's not going to be perfect because I'm not a lawyer, and I would imagine that most of the people I work with are also not lawyers. So the lawyers are very specific, looking for very specific things, but as we can get it as close to, best grammar, best formatting, the best content possible, the better off we're all going to be because that will move it through the process faster. There may be less questions. If the content makes sense, it's not too vague, or it's not over on the opposite end, it's not too specific so that we're basically skewing the solicitation to one person. That would help us save time because we wouldn't have to go back and make those changes. When you're sending something for CPO review, it's important to keep in mind that while some source account specialists are assigned to just one agency, there are some that are assigned to several agencies. So we have to we're kind of like jugglers. We have to juggle everybody's priorities at once, and legal even more so. We only have 6 attorneys that review contracts in the office, 7 if you include Paul. So it's 7 attorneys for 30 plus agencies. So we need to keep that in mind when you're sending us solicitations. They do have to juggle just like us. So the better, like I said earlier, the better we can get that document ahead of time, it's going to save you time because they're going to ask less questions. When they do ask questions, it's important to realize that a fast response does not necessarily equal a thorough response. When they send you red lines to your contract, make sure you don't just say yes or no. Give us your explanation for why you disagree with them. That's going to help us say, okay, we understand where you're coming from. Maybe we just move on from this question. And if you would rather just pick up the phone and call us, that'd be great too. I'm happy to go through, and most of the other specialists, I believe, would also be happy to go through those lines with you if you have questions. And then to the second question that we got from Tara, which is about agency approvals or timelines for approvals in Edison. Typically, I think our SLA is 2 weeks, correct, Nick, for contract approvals in Edison?
It's like
10 business days. COT generally has the same review time as well. We ask that people submit contracts for approval in Edison 30 days ahead of time. For grants, you have to submit an RER, or rule exception request, if you are submitting it less than 30 days. I don't believe we do the rule exception request for non-grant contracts. But keep in mind again that if you submit it last minute, there are COT, CPO legal, source account specialists. We all have multiple priorities, and priorities is actually something we're going to get to next. That may slow down that process. So the earlier you get that contract in, quicker that process could potentially go because we can better organize our time. I think that leads us into prioritization with Nick.
Yeah, that's a great transition. Yeah, so our last point, or our last tip here, is prioritization. And Yeah, Mike definitely led into this very well. So, you know, a lot of times our sourcing folks are working on multiple procurements, and you know, knowing which one of those procurements is the most important, the most crucial, and communicating that out is really really important for us to be able to work um, on the solicitations that you guys expect to get done first. So, so Mike mentioned the contract management plan earlier. I think the contract management plan is a great tool to look out into the future, know when your end dates are, know when you need to start reprocuring stuff, coming up with a game plan. But you guys all know that like you get one phone call and somebody says, "Hey, this is a priority, you know, so and so, you know, needs this today." It's a commissioner level person, it's the governor's office, whoever, you know, might have a stake in getting a certain solicitation done, then something gets bumped down the list and then something else takes its spot. I mean, I'm sure most of you guys, and you can use the chat for this, saw this like during COVID. You know, hey, we have to get this contract in place because like we're not in the office anymore. You know, you know, I think of like Department of Health, like they went from having to get testing and all this different stuff. So, you know, helping us work through what the agency is prioritizing, and knowing like those contracts need to get bumped to the front of the line. Obviously, that's going to have a residual effect because there's going to be other things that get scooted down, but that's very crucial for us to be working on the most important things. So that kind of ties into what we talked about earlier with communication, making that clear to your sourcing account specialist, you know, continuously doing that to make sure those items are done in a timely manner. Um, Conversely speaking, putting proper prioritization on items that are actually emergencies is important too, because if it's not an emergency but it's getting bumped up like it's an emergency, that not only puts your agency's procurements behind, but a lot of times we bump back other people's projects and procurements. So so that's just another kind of important thing, you know. The old saying, like if everything's an emergency, nothing's actually an emergency, is kind of like the point here. So, you know, if it's something that can wait through the normal like supply chain type process that we put everything through, then, you know, then we would like to process them that way and stay within our SLAs, but we know that that's not realistic and we know things that need to be moved around, and prioritized. So, um, that's kind of a quick point there. Make sure you're communicating the priority of each one of your items. And we are going to go into the final slide here. So I think we're right at 30 some odd minutes. Okay, right on time. So I think we said we were going to try to do it in 30 or 40-ish minutes. And this clock's broken and my watch doesn't work. So I don't know. It's 9:55. So I think we started at like 9:15 or 9:20. So
Good shape.
so any questions in the chat, and you guys can make these as specific as possible, and we will do our best to answer them.
We have one.
Okay,
When-
James is smiling.
When an it's just a long.
Okay.
When an agency submits a request that has to go through multiple approvals, is it possible that it could go through and or looked at by all approval sections for their input before being kicked back to the agency? Not kick it back for one error to be addressed and then have it go
Yeah.
through multiple rounds of it.
Yeah, so we get this question a lot, and me and Mike talked about this because we probably knew somebody was going to ask that. So a question that we get, to sum up what James said, is, can we do concurrent reviews on something? You know, like can the sourcing person and the CPO legal group and COT look at this at the same time and move it through at the same time? In practice, or maybe let's say this, in theory, it seems like that would work really well. The problem is that if that was the only assignment that each one of these people had, then it would be, you know, I think that we could do it like pretty easily, because there's so many moving pieces with each procurement, that we try not to do that. So we try to have the first line of defense be like the sourcing account specialist folks, and them get through the document and clean it up. And then for it to go to CPO legal, have them bless it, make changes. and then for it to go to the comptroller's office. Look, we've done it before. We've done concurrent reviews before. They tend to be really messy. They tend to be it tends to be like a version control nightmare. And it takes a lot. It usually takes longer, and then it also completely halts every other procurement that sourcing account specialist has, because they're having to manage every aspect of that one solicitation. So, look, I'm looking at Tara. She's the health person. If, COVID starts and they absolutely have to have something because it's an emergency, should we do a concurrent review on something? Like, we might have to do it for that, but we really, for like the day-to-day stuff, try not to do concurrent reviews, just because the management of that, with everything else going on, is really, really tough. Michael's got his hand up here.
So, like a two-parter, but do you have any suggestions on what an agency should do? Because I'm not the sourcing side, but do you have any suggestions on what an agency should do if they do get pushed back? Like, sometimes for our side, we'll say, make sure to mention that, this was the only error. We've already submitted this before, so that people are aware of what to hone in on. So it's not going through a full review each time.
Right. Yeah. So like for CPO legal or COT or
Right.
something.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's, a part of that's like the version control, to make sure, like, whenever we're sending it over, and we try to use like the comment functions. And, I know sometimes it's really hard to read, because you want to take the document in its original form and have all the strike throughs and all the comments. And like, if Mike leaves his first comment, and then the agency person goes in and leaves their second comment, and then Mike goes back and asks something, we try to leave all that stuff in there. Sometimes it gets deleted out along the way, because people want to like clean it up to get it to go to the next stage. So I think best practice is probably to leave all the edits in there, and then just change the track changes function to like the final review function, so you can kind of see it without all that stuff in there, and utilize that while you're doing your reviews. I mean, Mike, you're doing this like more on a day-to-day basis. Do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. I mean, you more or less covered it exactly as I would have.
Okay. Yeah, and if somebody wants to have a clean version of a document and also one with all the working things on it, I think that would be fine too. Like, if you're wanting to get everybody's comments on it, and then kind of let that live like in your own working file, to show that like Mike approved something, COT approved something, CPO legal approved something, and then also like go out and like save another one as, and accept all the changes as you go. So right whenever it gets approved, you can like post it. I think that would be fine too.
I did have one caveat to that. So this is actually something I did with TenCare. They had a couple of solicitations where we actually canceled them when COVID first came around, and we did a resolicitation of those. All we did there was they made really small updates. They highlighted them for me. I passed that on to CPO Legal and said, hey, this is a resolicitation. The only changes are the ones that are highlighted, and that made it a lot faster. So if you're doing a resolicitation, just highlight, or like even use the comment section, like Nick said, to point out those exact changes, and let us know, like, hey, I mean, your source account specialist will probably know that you're resoliciting this particular contract, but it's always good to just point out what the differences are if you're resoliciting, because like I said, we'll let CPO Legal know and COT, and it'll make the review go faster.
And one other thing that I want to make sure that you guys are, thinking about our partnership is, I don't want the partnership between like sourcing and the agency folks to be like, I'm tossing this document over the fence, then Mike's going to start working on it. Like, if you need to call Mike, or this, I keep saying Mike because he's standing right here, but like, if you need to call your sourcing account specialist and maybe take 5 or 10 minutes to explain, like, these are what the highlights mean. This is what we're trying to do. You guys already approved this. Like, he works on 1 million projects. All these guys work on 1 million projects. If it's to give them a refresher to say, you guys already approved the scope language. We updated a couple of things here. We wanted you to look at it again because, we put this in the back burner. Take that 5 or 10 minutes to give them a call on the phone, and make sure that they know exactly what you're trying to do, and make sure that it's clear what you're trying to do, if it's outside like the normal, like, kind of flow of things. Helen's about to ask a question, it looks like.
Well, so there was a question mark, but I'm not sure what the question mark was about. So, Henry, if you want to clarify, we would be happy to answer a follow-up question, unless it's already gotten answered. All right, just want to make sure.
I think question.
Oh, I see. It was a loose question mark.
Gotcha, gotcha.
It's a choose your own adventure question.
Yes, that's what it was.
There's another question.
Okay, Tara's got one.
When an agency submits a request.
Oh,
Same.
Zach was putting that
Oh,
through.
so sorry.
Yeah.
Me. Question.
All right, any new questions, additional questions?
I need to contact you.
Contact me. Oh, if you have any other questions. Yeah, so I mean, if something really specific comes up and you guys want to ask me or Mike, my email address is nicholas.edwards@tn.gov. Mike's is mike.bentheimer@tn.gov. James was raised his hand. You guys can contact us, with anything as general or specific as possible, and we would be happy to address it. And creating this presentation, it was and Tara did a lot of work on this. I think it was a little challenging because everybody's jobs are a little different, and not every procurement goes through the same cookie cutter steps. So obviously there's a lot of nuance to each item. So if something comes up and you said, well, you guys said this, but in a different situation, it was handled a different way. We would be happy to address that, and maybe that's something that we can learn as well to change or improve upon. Tara's got a question.
Question this time. Does every state agency or commission receive a contract management plan annually?
So that's something that I think is a CPO rule that everybody gets one. I think that is true, that everybody has a contract management plan, and there may be a few little exemptions here and there. But I can get that information. I know all the ones on my team, I believe, had one last year. And so like what
So
that, yeah.
It's select ones that we have, solely.
Well, I think you're thinking
Or
SPAs.
SPAs.
Yeah, so we don't have if you guys have heard of an SPA, a partnership agreement, that's something we have with some agencies, but not all the agencies. And that basically just reinforces our SLAs, which are service level agreements, that reinforces like what our escalation plan would be. So like if Mike's not getting the job done, Mike reports to me and it comes to me. And then if me and Mike aren't working, like it goes to Chris, who's the director, that sort of thing. Just like documenting that to make sure that we're starting at like the correct level, both internally and externally. And then the other portion of that is like a project management type request process. So like if you have a solicitation that's coming up, we would work through that with you on like a really specific level to come up with a timetable and steps for each. We don't do that a ton, but if that's something that you guys need, it's definitely part of the SPA. But not every agency has an SPA. I do believe every agency submits the contract management plan, but I can get some specifics on that if there's not. I think there's a couple of little carve outs here and there.
Yeah.
But
So there's a specific question that came in, but in general, are boards and commissions part of this contract management plan?
yeah, I'll have to check. You think so?
Yeah. So I have a couple agency, well, I call them agencies, but they're commissions and boards that also submit those.
Okay.
So they are required.
And we can check Maria or, yeah, okay.
That are really, we can take, it
Yeah.
doesn't need to be in the group.
If you guys can just email me and Mike about that, we can address that. I think a lot of the smaller agencies, you guys might only have like a handful of contracts. The larger agencies that might be managing 10 or 12 or 15 reprocurements a year, that's taking them through, and Mike kind of explained the layout of the spreadsheet, but it's essentially, this is when the contract starts, this is when it ends, this is how much money's left on it, this is how it was procured last time, here's the notes on it. And then, when we meet with the agencies over it, we kind of come up with a game plan on each one of those. So if it's a commission or a board or somebody like that, you might only have 2 or 3 contracts, and there might not be like a need to report out on that. But I don't know what the actual rule says. So yeah, just email us that on the side and we can get you an answer on that. It's a great tool though. In the past, we didn't have a standard process for it. So people were just sending us something different every time. So a couple of years ago, we standardized the process, put it in the same spreadsheet, pulled the same information for everybody, formatted it the same. So I mean, it's a really clean process now, year after year to go back and and throughout the year to use as a tool.
Based on the question that's here, this, though it's a specific question, the question is, I don't recall receiving one for the state board. Are these plans something that the agencies send to us, or are they something we send to the agencies?
So before last year, they were sending them to us. And last year, we created the spreadsheet, put all the information within the spreadsheet, and then we sent it out and they answered it in there. So that has recently changed and we rolled that. Yeah, I think the rollout, and this is maybe my own editorial on it, the rollout maybe was stunted slightly because COVID and we weren't here and people were treading water to get through that year. So, yeah, be looking for it from your folks. And if you don't see it, reach out to me and I'll get you kind of an example. Honestly, if you're not getting one and you're exempt from it, which once again, I haven't read the rules, so don't hold me to that, but I can provide you the queries to where you're pulling those queries and getting that same data and you can kind of do it internally, to your agency if you're not part of that contract management plan process.
Questions are all there.
Cool. Easy enough. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, y'all.